Welcome back. This is Voice in the Wilderness. I'm Brian, your host, and today's story that I want to speak to you about, it's not a comfortable one. It's happening around the world, but people are turning a blind eye to it. The details, they won't trend on TikTok, and they certainly won't lead the nightly news. And it certainly won't be framed honestly by any Western or mainstream media. But it does matter. It matters immensely. Because while the world is arguing about pronouns, gender ideology, climate slogans, and political theatre, Christians are being hunted, kidnapped, and terrorised for the crime of worshipping Jesus Christ. Now, this week in Nigeria, nearly 200 Christians were abducted directly from their church services. They weren't in battlefields. They weren't even in military zones. They were taken directly from their church pews in their churches and kidnapped. And it's part of a much bigger, uglier global pattern, which we'll go into. And hopefully you'll get a little bit more understanding about the problem. So in the early morning hours in Kaduna State in Nigeria, armed militants stormed 3 separate churches during their Sunday worship. The churches were 2 were cherubim and seraphim congregations, and 1 was an evangelical church called Winning All. And they were surrounded by gunmen carrying automatic weapons. I believe they were AK-47s. And those worshippers, those Christians, were just told plainly, if you run, you will die. Men, women, children, entire families. Even I've heard that some families of 10 or more people were there, and they were all taken together. They were forced out of church and marched into the nearby forests. So they didn't spare the children or anything like that. By the time the dust settled, it was 177 Christians had been abducted. Just let that number sink in. 177 Christians going about their Sunday in worship. Now, that's not a mere incident. That's a mass abduction. And some did manage to escape days later, but most didn't. Community leaders confirmed children were taken. Elderly people were taken. People who had done nothing more than attend their church service to worship Christ. Now, the attackers reportedly identified themselves as Fulani militants, a group with radicalized factions that have increasingly targeted Christian communities across Nigeria's middle belt. And here's the key point that the media will avoid. They will avoid telling you this. These attacks are not random banditry. They are selective. They are ideological. And they are religiously motivated. Churches are targeted. Christian villages are targeted. And Christian worshippers are targeted. And it keeps happening. In fact, there's a YouTube channel called Christian Warrior Training. And if you watch that, you see how many of these ideologically, religiously motivated church attacks on Christian churches are starting to happen in the USA as well. Now, Nigeria is considered one of the most dangerous countries in the world to profess to be a Christian. Year after year, the reports show that churches are burned, pastors are murdered, whole congregations are massacred, worshippers kidnapped for ransom, conversion, or terror. Now, groups like Boko Haram, ISWAP, and radical Fulani factions openly embrace Islamist ideology and explicitly view Christianity as an enemy to be eradicated or subdued. I don't need to go into what those 2 words mean. It's not nice. And Nigeria isn't alone. In Burkina Faso, Islamist militants have attacked church services, executing believers and abducting others in the church. In Mozambique, Christian villages have been raided by ISIS-aligned insurgents. In the Middle East, Christians have been kidnapped, displaced, or wiped out of ancestral homelands that they've inhabited for nearly 2,000 years. And in Pakistan, Christian girls are routinely kidnapped, forcibly converted, and married off to Muslim men, regardless of the age of the girls, often with no legal consequences or repercussions. In the Philippines, Islamist groups like Abu Sayyaf have kidnapped priests and missionaries, and it's been going on for years. It's not religious tension, it's religious persecution, and it overwhelmingly flows in one direction. And what makes this even more revolting is the near total silence from the Western government, the Western and mainstream media, and the human rights institutions. And especially disgusting is the silence from the United Nations. If 177 people were kidnapped from a mosque or a pride or trans event, or even some political rallies, it would dominate the headlines for weeks. But because these victims are Christians, often in Africa or the developing world, their suffering is treated just as background noise. There's no emergency UN summits called, no woke celebrity hashtags, no mass outrage campaigns, because as far as the woke left are concerned, it's only Christians. So who cares? Instead, we get vague language like unidentified gunmen, bandits, or local unrest. We don't hear Islamists, radical Muslims, not even the mention of Islam. Anything, anything at all to avoid naming the ideological motivation behind these crimes. But let's be honest about this. When kidnappings, executions, and church attacks are repeatedly carried out by Islamic radical fundamentalists, refusing to say so doesn't promote peace. It enables more evil. And that is what these media institutions, these governments, and even the UN are doing. They are condoning the pure evil in our world. Calling it out is not Islamophobia. It is simply saying the truth. And without the truth, there is no peace. There is no justice. So Christians around the world are not asking for privilege. They never have. They are asking to be able to worship without fear, to raise their children without terror, and to live without being hunted. The Nigerian families whose loved ones were dragged into the forest this week deserve more than silence, especially from the United Nations. They deserve international pressure. They deserve real security action and moral clarity from leaders of countries who claim to care about human rights. Because if the world keeps looking away, these kidnappings will continue en masse. We see people like Anthony Albanese in Australia, Keir Starmer in the UK, shouting and throwing money at countries led by terrorists. But when it comes to Christians, all we hear is the crickets in the biased and bigoted silence. And history will remember not only the perpetrators, but those who knew, those who did nothing, those who stuck their heads in the sand because it was only Christians. Thanks, everyone. This has been Voice in the Wilderness. As I said, I'm Brian, and please stay alert, stay grounded in the truth, and never accept silence in the face of evil. And I'll be back soon with another story for you. Bless you.